It was supposed to be just coffee. A harmless late-night catch-up. One of those casual, I'm in the neighborhood texts that never really meant anything. Until it did. I still remember the sound of the doorbell, how it cut through the silence of my apartment like a spark. I wasn't even wearing real clothes. Just an oversized tee that slipped off one shoulder and a pair of soft cotton shorts. I hadn't planned on seeing him. Not like that. But there he was. Eli. Tall, disheveled from the September wind, with that lazy smirk he always wore when he knew he shouldn't be somewhere but came anyway. His hoodie clung to the outline of his shoulders, damp from the drizzle, and his eyes flicked down my body for just a second, quick, but not quick enough to go unnoticed. You said coffee, I teased, stepping aside. Still want some, he replied, voice low, amused. And then like a fool I laughed. Nervous. Giddy. Because that smirk? It had history. We hadn't seen each other since the breakup. Not mine. His. With Lily. My best friend. Yeah. That's the part one haven't told anyone. It wasn't supposed to be anything. We were friends too. He and I. We had our own rhythm, sarcastic banter, knowing glances, inside jokes that no one else understood. But it was always clean. Always appropriate. Until suddenly it wasn't. He walked into the kitchen like he'd been there 100 times because he had. I watched his fingers wrap around the mug I handed him. I watched the way he leaned against the counter, eyes on me like he was trying to read my mind. And maybe he was. Because I was thinking things I shouldn't have been thinking. Not about him. Not now. The air shifted. Not dramatically, just a little. Like the pause between a question and an answer. Like the moment you realize the movie you thought you knew is taking a turn you didn't see coming. He took a sip, eyes never leaving mine. Still make it strong. Some things never change, I said. But everything had. Because the way he was looking at me wasn't friendly. It wasn't familiar. It was charged. Slow. Like he was cataloging the parts of me he'd never allowed himself to notice before. Or maybe he'd always noticed. I felt heat crawl up my neck. My lips were dry, but I didn't reach for water. I wanted to sit, to do something with my hands to break the moment, but I didn't. I just stood there, waiting, hoping he wouldn't say what he was about to say, or praying that he would. You look different, he said finally. Different how? His eyes dropped for a second, like someone who knows what she wants. My breath caught. The clock ticked louder than before. The rain outside had stopped, but the electricity between us was just starting. I should have told him to leave. I should have laughed it off, changed the subject, poured more coffee. But instead I asked the question I knew I shouldn't. Do you know what you want, Eli? He didn't answer. He just stepped closer. And that's when everything changed. He stepped closer, and the space between us shrank like it had been waiting to disappear. I didn't move. I couldn't. Something rooted me in place, something deeper than fear or desire. It was the kind of stillness that comes when you know whatever happens next, there's no going back. Eli didn't touch me. Not yet. But his presence touched everything. The air. My skin. The way my heart knocked against my ribs like it was trying to warn me. Or push me forward. I could feel the warmth of him, the scent of rain and cologne and something darker I couldn't name. My mind spun, but my body was painfully aware of how close he was. How close I'd let him come. Say the word, he murmured. It wasn't a line. It was a dare. A test. Maybe even a lifeline in case I wanted to pull us both back from the edge. But I didn't. I couldn't speak. My mouth parted, but only a soft breath came out. And he took that breath as permission. His hand came up, fingers brushing a strand of hair away from my face like he had every right. And maybe he did. Maybe we had always been dancing around this moment, pretending it wasn't there. I shouldn't be here, he said, voice low, almost regretful. You are, I whispered. He nodded, his eyes roaming over my face, slow and searching. You always made it hard to stay away. God. I felt that. Because I'd felt it too. Every late-night conversation when we were all still pretending it was innocent. Every glance that lasted a second too long. Every time I'd caught myself comparing other men to him and hating myself for it. What about Lily? I asked, though it felt like the words belonged to someone else. His jaw tensed. A flicker of guilt crossed his face and then passed. She was never the one waiting at the back of my mind. That sentence broke something open in me. I turned away, not because I wanted to stop anything, but because I didn't trust myself to look at him and stay sane. I went to the sink pretending to rinse the mug, anything to calm the storm inside me. But I could hear him behind me. His footsteps were slow, almost careful but full of intent. I felt his hand on my lower back. Not possessive, not forceful, just there. Warm, steady. It sent a shiver through me, sharp and electric. "Tell me to stop," he said softly. But I didn't. I leaned back just enough for our bodies to align. And when I did, he let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than anything else. We stood like that for a moment, our bodies not quite touching, but our shadows already entwined. Then his lips found my shoulder. Not a kiss, just a touch, barely there, like a secret, and I melted. His mouth on my shoulder was nothing and everything all at once. It wasn't a kiss, not really. Just the warmth of his breath, the slow pressure of his lips hovering there, as if he were asking permission with every millimeter. But the ache it stirred in me was anything but polite. My whole body became aware of itself in a way that felt unfair. Like he had reached inside me and flipped a switch I didn't know was there. I turned to face him slowly. Our eyes met. It was one of those charged, breathless moments where the rest of the world fades out, and there's only skin, heat, and the dangerous hum of possibility. He didn't smile. Neither did I. There was no room for performance now. No mask. No game. "I don't want to be a mistake," I said. Came out quieter than I meant it to. His brows drew together like the words hurt him. "You never were." That answer, so fast, so sure, cut straight through the fog of guilt and hesitation. My fingers brushed against his hoodie, light and trembling, like I was touching something sacred. He let me, standing there, his breath shallow. We were close now. Too close for this to be platonic. Too close for this to be undone with a laugh or an apology. And yet neither of us moved. The silence between us stretched, not awkward, but pregnant with everything we hadn't said. His hands hovered near my hips, open but not grabbing. Waiting. "Eli," I whispered. He shook his head slightly. "Don't say my name like that." "Like what?" "Like it means more than it should." But it did. God, it did. Because this wasn't just lust, though that was certainly there, coiled tight and electric in every inch of air between us. This was years of almosts and what-ifs, of moments stolen and buried under layers of restraint. And now? Now it was all bubbling up, too loud, too heavy to ignore. I reached up, fingers tracing the edge of his jaw. His eyes fluttered shut for a second, just a second, like he was memorizing the feel of my touch. "I don't know what this is," I confessed. "Neither do I," he said. "But I know I'm not ready to walk away from it." He leaned in then, slow and uncertain, as if giving me the chance to stop him. I didn't. Our foreheads touched, and I felt his breath against my lips. My heart slammed in my chest, not from fear, but from knowing this moment would change everything. He kissed me. Finally. It was soft at first, almost reverent. A test. But then it deepened. Not in urgency but in weight. Like we'd both been holding this in for far too long. And now it was spilling out, years of denial, wrapped in one long unspoken truth. His hand slid to my waist, grounding me. And I let him. I let myself fall into that kiss like it was the only real thing I'd felt in months. 'Cause maybe it was. But just as his hand started to explore more boldly, I pulled back. His eyes searched mine, confused, worried. "I need to show you something," I said, voice barely a breath. He blinked. "What?" I hesitated. My pulse was wild. "It's a secret." His gaze darkened, not with judgment but curiosity, concern, and maybe, somewhere beneath it all, anticipation. I didn't speak as I led him down the hallway. He followed, silent but tense, the kiss still hanging between us like smoke. I could feel him behind me, his presence, his breath, the heat of him. The air was thick with it. The unspoken. The undone. My heart raced with every step. Not from fear of what I was about to show him, but from what it meant. From what it would unlock. We stopped at the last door on the right. My bedroom. I turned to face him, hand resting on the doorknob. He looked at me, unsure but open. "What are we doing?" I should have had an answer. I should have had a speech prepared about boundaries and blurred lines and the consequences of touching what should stay untouched. But instead I said, "Do you trust me?" He didn't hesitate. Yes. God, that was almost worse than hesitation, because I wasn't sure I trusted myself. I opened the door and stepped inside. The lights were low, just the amber glow of a small lamp beside the bed. Everything felt softer in that room. Quieter. Like the world couldn't follow us there. He stepped in behind me, eyes scanning the space. And then he saw it. The envelope. It was sitting on my dresser, angled like it had been waiting for this moment. Cream-colored, worn at the edges. His name written on the front. His real name. The one I never used. Elijah, he read, barely above a whisper. His eyes snapped to mine. What is this? I swallowed hard. She gave it to me. A week after you broke up. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Lily. I nodded. She told me not to open it. Said it was for you. But I couldn't bring myself to give it to you. Not after what happened. Not after you left. He walked toward it slowly, like it might burn him if he touched it. When his fingers brushed the envelope, I saw his whole body tense. The way his jaw locked. The way his breath stuttered. He didn't open it. Just held it, staring down at the paper like it held a piece of the past he wasn't ready to face. You kept it all this time? He asked, voice low. I didn't know what she wrote, I said honestly. But I knew, if I gave it to you we might never talk again. His head lifted. His eyes met mine, and they were full of something I couldn't name. Hurt maybe. Or gratitude. Or both. Why now? I stepped closer. Because if we're doing this, I paused, voice catching. I want everything between us to be honest. No secrets. No ghosts. He looked at me like he was trying to decide whether to run or fall. Then, without another word, he set the envelope down and turned back to me. I'll read it, he said. Later. And then he reached for me again. Not urgently this time. Not with hunger. With need. His arms slid around me, slow and sure, and my body folded into his like it had been waiting for that embrace all along. There was nothing rushed about it, just the solid press of his chest against mine, the way his hands moved up my back like he was learning every inch of me by feel. I've thought about this, he murmured against my hair. More times than I can admit. Me too, I breathed. And when he kissed me this time it wasn't tentative. It was deep. Certain. Promise. A beginning. But somewhere in the back of my mind the letter still burned. And I had no idea what it would ignite once it was opened. We didn't speak about the envelope again that night. It sat there, unopened, on the dresser, silent and humming like a fault line. But neither of us dared touch it. Not yet. Because we were already unraveling, slowly, deliciously, and neither of us wanted to break the spell. His kiss deepened, hand sliding down my back, tracing lines no one had ever mapped the way he did. Like my body was a language he was fluent in, even though we'd never spoken it before. And I responded without thought, without fear, only feeling. My fingers clutched at the fabric of his hoodie until it was too much, too in the way, and I tugged it upward. He let me strip it off, wordless, watching me with eyes that looked both reverent and hungry, like he couldn't believe I was letting him see this part of me, and that he didn't want to miss a second of it. He bent his forehead to mine again. Still time to stop, he whispered. But I shook my head. There was no stopping. Not anymore. We moved to the bed like a tide shifting in slow motion. Not rushed. Not fumbling. Just steady, unstoppable gravity. I felt his fingers thread into mine as we sat at the edge of the mattress, like even now, with everything poised on the brink, he wanted to anchor me. Make sure I was here. That I was sure. I don't want to hurt you, he said softly. You're not, I whispered back. Unless you leave again. That made him pause. He touched my cheek, tracing the line of my jaw with his thumb. Then I won't. His lips found mine again. This time with a slow burn that radiated all the way to my toes. We sank back into the sheets, our movements full of pauses and half-sighs, like we were tasting this moment more than touching it. But then, just as we were disappearing into each other, he froze. His body stiffened above mine. His breath held like a thought he couldn't say out loud. What? I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Just slowly lifted himself up and looked over his shoulder. At the envelope. Still untouched. Still there. I need to read it, he said, voice hoarse. I sat up, my pulse stuttering. Now. He nodded. If I don't, I'll feel like I'm betraying something. I understood. Even though everything in me screamed not to break this moment, not to let Lily back in. Her memory, her voice, her shadow. I knew we couldn't go forward while she still stood in the doorway between us. So I watched as he crossed the room. The paper crinkled in his hands. He sat on the edge of the bed just far enough to make me ache. Then he opened it. Silence stretched between us. The only sound was the rustle of paper and the slow inhale of his breath as he read. His eyes scanned every word like they carried weight too heavy for just ink and parchment. And when he reached the end, he didn't speak. Just sat there. Still. Haunted. Eli? I asked, voice trembling. He turned to me slowly. And when he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper fractured by something deeper. She knew. I blinked. Knew what? His throat worked, his fingers still clinging to the letter like it might vanish. She knew about us. The floor tilted. What do you mean? He handed me the letter. Read it. And as I unfolded the paper and saw the first line. If you're reading this, it means you've already looked at her the way I always feared you would. My heart stopped. Lily had known. She'd seen it before we did. Before we admitted it. And now? Now everything was about to change. I read the letter with trembling hands. Each word peeled back a layer I didn't know we'd been hiding. Not just from Lily. From ourselves. Her handwriting was soft, looping. The kind you'd expect from someone who never liked confrontation. But her words? They sliced. I saw the way you looked at her, Eli. The way your voice changed when you said her name. I saw the pauses, the hesitations, the things you didn't say. And I pretended not to. Each line felt like a spotlight not just on him but on me. She never crossed the line. Not once. I know that. She was loyal in ways I never was. But I also know that someday when I'm not part of the picture, something will happen. And when it does, I want you to know, I'm not angry. I could barely breathe. I just hope you're brave enough to admit it was always there. By the time I reached the last line, I wasn't sure if I was shaking from shock, guilt, or relief. I looked up. Eli was staring at me, unreadable. She knew, I whispered. All this time. He nodded slowly. I feel like I cheated on her without ever touching you. My chest tightened. I feel the same. He reached for me then, gentle, cautious. But we didn't. No, I said. But we wanted to. That truth hung in the air like incense, sweet, intoxicating, heavy with memory. We sat in silence for a long moment, letting the words settle. There was no hiding now. No pretending. Everything was out in the open. And yet somehow it felt like a release. I don't know if I deserve this, he said quietly, glancing down at our intertwined hands. I squeezed his fingers. Maybe we don't. But that doesn't make it any less real. He looked at me then, something in his eyes softening. Do you think she hated us for it? No, I whispered. I think she was scared. Of being left behind. He nodded. We left her anyway. A beat of silence passed. And then unexpectedly a tear slipped down his cheek. He wiped it quickly, but the crack in his voice was there when he said, I never loved anyone the way I loved her. Until I realized I was never really in love at all. The words hit me like a confession. Not just of guilt, but of release. Of readiness. I leaned in, pressing my forehead to his, grounding him the way he had done for me just hours ago. We didn't choose this, I whispered. But we can choose what we do now. His hand slid to my waist again, but this time it felt different. He wasn't claiming me. He was holding on. Like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to something real. And maybe I was. Our kiss this time was deeper. Not with urgency, but with understanding. The past didn't vanish. The guilt didn't evaporate. But it became quieter. Bearable. Shared. He pulled me into his lap, his hands roaming my back with reverence, and I let myself sink into him. Into the moment. Into the fire we tried to smother for far too long. We weren't pretending anymore. We weren't hiding. We were becoming. Whatever this was, we were finally letting it happen. There's something terrifying about letting go of restraint. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing gravity is not your enemy. It's your release. That's what it felt like the moment Eli leaned back, taking me with him, and the weight of everything we had denied finally gave way. Not violently, not hungrily, but with aching, deliberate slowness. Like we knew the night would only last so long, and we wanted to feel every second of it. I remember the texture of his skin under my hands, warm, taut, familiar in all the ways that made it feel dangerous. The way he touched me wasn't just tender. It was reverent. Like he'd dreamed this 1,000 times and was afraid it would vanish if he moved too fast. Every brush of his fingers sent a current through me. Every breath between us was a question, answered in silence, in the way we arched into each other, in the shiver of anticipation that made me gasp when his hand settled on the small of my back. He looked up at me like I was the reason he had never fully fallen for anyone else. And for a moment I let myself believe I was. But then I whispered her name. Not loudly. Not bitterly. Just softly. Like a memory. Lily. His eyes closed, as if the sound of it still carried too much weight. And I thought, maybe this is where the moment shatters. Maybe this is where we realize some ghosts aren't ready to leave the room. But he opened his eyes again, looked straight at me and said, "She let me go. I just didn't know it yet." And with that, something shifted. We stopped pretending we were walking a line. We crossed it. We melted into the night like we were made for it. The rain started again, soft against the windows. The scent of coffee still lingered faintly in the air, mixed now with something warmer, more primal. My sheets wrapped around us like a secret, and for the first time in a very long time I stopped thinking. About rules. About regrets. About what would come next. I just felt. His mouth on my collarbone. My fingers in his hair. The slow, burning rhythm of bodies learning to speak without words. We lost track of time. The hours blurred into each other. Touch and breath and whispered names exchanged like promises. Not of forever, but of now. Of truth. Of finally. And when it was over, when we lay there in the hush that only comes after the storm, I didn't feel guilt. I felt whole. He curled his arm around me, pulling me closer. And in the dark I heard him whisper, "I dreamed of this. Every night I wasn't with her. And hated myself for it." I traced my fingers along his forearm, slow and thoughtful. "You're not the only one who hated yourself." He kissed the top of my head. "Do you hate yourself now?" I thought about it. About what we'd done. About what it meant. And then I said, no, not anymore. Because even if it was wrong, it was real. But just as I drifted into sleep, wrapped in him, warm and finally unguarded, his phone buzzed. Once. Then twice. He tensed. I felt it. He reached for it with one hand, careful not to disturb me, but I was already watching him through heavy eyes. And when the screen lit up, I saw the name, and everything in me went still. It wasn't Lily. It wasn't a friend. It was another woman. The name on the screen glowed in the dark. Madison. Not Lily. Not me. Someone else. I didn't speak. Just watched as Eli's thumb hovered over the notification. He didn't open it. He didn't silence it. He just stared, frozen in a moment that felt like it would split us both. I sat up slowly, the sheet slipping off my shoulder, the warmth between us dissolving with every second of silence. My heart didn't race, it stung. A dull, cold sting. The kind you feel when something that felt like home turns out to be a borrowed key. "Who is she?" I asked. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide, caught, exposed. "It's not what you think." God. That line. That stupid, tired line. "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like he could erase the guilt clinging to it. "She's someone I saw. After Lily. Before tonight. It didn't mean anything." "But it was recent," I said. His silence answered for him. "Was it yesterday? Last week?" He shook his head, but not convincingly. "A month ago. Maybe less. We stopped talking. I swear." "Does she know that?" He looked away. That was enough. I pulled the sheet tighter around me, suddenly too aware of my skin, of the scent of him on my neck, of how easily I had let him in, not just into my bed but into something deeper. Something I didn't give lightly. You should go, I said quietly. His eyes snapped back to mine, panic rising. No. Please. Don't let this ruin. It's not just about her, I cut in. It's about me. About what I let myself believe this was. He moved toward me, but I flinched back. Not in fear. In hurt. I thought this meant something, I said. That we were finally honest. But there was still someone else. Still a version of you I didn't know. He sank to the edge of the bed, his face in his hands. I didn't plan for this. For you and me. I didn't know we'd end up here. But you wanted to, I said. And that makes it worse. We sat there for a long time. The rain had stopped. The room was full of that strange, pale light that comes just before dawn, when everything feels raw and too real. He looked at me one last time, his voice cracked and low. I meant every second with you. I know, I whispered. But sometimes that's not enough. He stood, gathered his clothes in silence, and without another word he left. The door clicked shut, and I was alone. Alone in the sheets still warm from a man who had haunted my dreams. And now my reality. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat there, staring at the faint imprint his body had left in the mattress. A ghost of something that almost became real. And then I did cry. Not because I regretted it, but because I didn't. Because for one night, I'd let myself believe in a version of love that felt like fate. Even if it came wrapped in someone else's ending. Even if it didn't last.